Welcome back to LexTalks, Legal Topics Simplified. You know, we're all about making law school a little less overwhelming, right?
Definitely.
So today, we're diving deep into something super relevant for you guys as law students here in India.
hmm
It's all about the constitutional provisions that protect our environment.
The right to a clean environment.
Exactly. We're going to be looking at directive principles of state policy,
Right.
fundamental duties, everything that comes into play.
Yeah, it's fascinating how the Indian Constitution, it doesn't specifically say right to a clean environment,
Right.
but it actually sets up this whole framework for environmental protection in so many different ways.
It's like a puzzle almost. So all
Yeah.
these pieces fit together.
Exactly.
So let's start with the preamble, just to set the stage.
Big picture.
Yeah, the preamble talks about social justice and a decent standard of living,
Yeah,
which kind of hints at environmental justice too, don't you think?
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think a decent standard of living has to include a healthy environment, right?
For sure, you can't have one without the other.
You can't.
And the preamble really sets the tone for the whole Constitution in terms of the state's responsibility,
Yeah, laying down that responsibility.
creating that kind of society.
Right.
Okay, so we've got the preamble,
Mm-hmm.
but then we get into the specifics
Yeah.
with articles like Article 47.
Right.
What's the deal with that one?
So Article 47 is all about the state's duty to improve public health and raise the standard of living.
Okay.
And that includes, prohibiting the consumption of things that are harmful to people.
Right.
Now think about this. A clean environment that's super essential for public health, isn't it?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I mean, if your water's polluted or you're breathing in toxic fumes, your health is going to suffer.
Exactly. So Article 47, while it might not be directly about the environment,
Yeah.
it has these implications for how the state needs to protect the environment
Okay.
to actually fulfill its duty to public health.
Interesting.
We see this playing out in real life, in cases of industrial pollution.
Oh, right. Where the state has to come in and regulate things to protect people's health.
So it's like this indirect link
Yeah.
that the courts have recognized.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's cool. Now, what about us? What about the citizens? Article 51 AG.
Yeah.
That talks about our fundamental duties when it comes to the environment.
Right. Article 51 AG puts it on us, the citizens, to protect and improve our environment.
Okay.
Everything from forests and lakes to wildlife. It even mentions having compassion for living creatures.
So the Constitution's saying, hey, this is everyone's responsibility.
Exactly.
It's not just the government.
It's a shared responsibility.
But how do we as citizens actually make sure the state is doing its part?
Right.
Can we just point to Article 51 AG and say, hey, you're not doing your job?
Well, that's where the courts come in.
Okay.
Remember Article 21?
The right to life.
The right to life and personal liberty.
Yeah.
Indian courts, they've interpreted this right to include the right to a healthy environment.
Whoa.
And that's huge. So our right to a healthy environment is tied to our right to life itself.
It is.
That's powerful. Do you have any examples of how that's played out in court cases?
Oh, definitely. There's the case of L.K. Kulwal v. State of Rajasthan.
Okay.
The Rajasthan High Court, they directly linked environmental quality to Article 21. They basically said that a polluted environment, it can actually threaten people's lives.
So breathing polluted air
Exactly.
could be seen as a violation of your right to life.
It could.
That sets a pretty high standard
It does.
for environmental protection.
Absolutely.
And then there's that other case, Charan Lal Sahu v. Union of India, right?
Yes. In that case, the court said that the state has this duty to protect a healthy environment.
Okay.
And they connected it to Articles 21, 48A, and 51 AG.
So they're weaving all these different constitutional provisions together
Exactly.
to create this comprehensive framework
Yes.
for environmental protection.
That's right.
That's really fascinating. It shows how these seemingly separate articles actually all work together
They do.
to protect the environment.
They work together.
Are there any other landmark cases that we should know about?
Oh, there are so many, but one that stands out is the MC Mehta v. Union of India case.
Okay.
The one dealing with the stone crushing activities in Delhi.
Right.
In that case, the court straight up said that the right to fresh air and a pollution-free environment is part of the right to life.
Wow.
And they actually forced those polluting industries to relocate because of that.
So it's not just about preventing people from dying.
No.
It's about making sure they have a good quality of life
Exactly. A decent quality of life.
in a healthy environment.
That's right.
And this case really set a precedent
It did.
for all this environmental litigation in India.
It did. It showed how seriously the judiciary takes these environmental rights.
Okay, so we've talked about the right to life and a healthy environment, but Article 21 also protects our right to livelihood, right?
It does.
How does that tie into environmental protection?
Well, think about it. So many people's livelihoods depend directly on a healthy environment.
Right.
Farmers, fishermen, forest dwellers, their survival is tied to the health of the ecosystem.
Absolutely.
So when the environment is damaged,
Yeah.
it's not just some abstract legal issue.
Yeah.
It's taking away people's ability to earn a living and support their families.
It's a real tangible impact
A very real impact.
on people's lives.
Absolutely.
And we saw this principle in action in that famous Taj Mahal case, right?
Yes.
Where industries were moved to protect the monument from pollution.
Exactly.
That's a classic example of sustainable development,
It is.
where the court balanced economic interests with protecting the environment and the people's livelihoods.
A classic example.
So it's about finding that balance, right?
It is.
Protecting the environment doesn't mean shutting down all industry.
No.
It's about finding ways to develop sustainable
development.
so that we don't destroy the resources we depend on.
That's right.
Now let's move on to Article 14, the right to equality.
Right.
This one's interesting to me. I'm curious to see how this seemingly basic right
Yeah.
plays into environmental protection.
Well, what's fascinating at Article 14 is it ensures that the state's actions towards environmental protection have to be fair
Okay.
and not arbitrary.
Makes sense.
They can't just favor one group or industry over another.
Right.
Take the case of Bangalore Medical Trust, VBS Mudappa.
Okay.
The court there prioritized the public interest in having those open spaces and parks over the potential profits from building a hospital on that land.
So it's like saying everyone has an equal right
Yes.
to a healthy environment.
Exactly.
And the state can't play favorites
No, they can't.
when it comes to protecting that.
Right.
That's right. And that's so important when you think about how environmental harm often affects
Yeah.
marginalized communities more than others.
Disproportionately.
Right. It's all about environmental justice.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered Article 14. Let's shift gears a bit and talk about Article 19,
Okay.
the right to freedom of speech and expression.
Yeah.
How does that connect to environmental issues?
Think about cases like rural litigation and entitlement, Kendra,
Okay.
where citizens actually use their right to free speech to raise concerns about mining activities that were harming the environment.
Right.
Article 19 protects their right to speak up, to protest,
Yeah.
and to hold the government accountable for environmental damage.
So freedom of speech isn't just about expressing opinions.
No, it's not.
It's about having a voice in decisions that affect your environment,
Absolutely.
your life,
Yeah,
and being able to hold those in power accountable.
exactly.
And that right is crucial for activists,
Yes.
journalists, ordinary citizens
Yeah.
who are trying to raise awareness about environmental issues and push for change.
It's crucial for them.
It's like that saying, silence is consent.
Right.
You have to use your voice
You do,
to protect what you care about.
especially when it comes to the environment.
Exactly. Okay, so Article 19 is about raising our voices.
Right.
But what happens when the right to trade and commerce,
Yes.
which is also protected under Article 19.1, comes into conflict with environmental protection?
That's a good question.
What happens then?
Well, that's where those restrictions in Article 19.6 come in.
Okay.
They give the state the power to put some reasonable limits on trade and commerce to prevent environmental damage.
Sounds like a balancing act.
It is.
You know, the state has to protect both the environment and the economy.
Exactly. Finding that balance,
Right.
It's not always easy.
And we see the court stepping in
Yes.
to make sure the environment isn't sacrificed for
Right.
short-term economic gain.
That's right.
Do you have an example of that?
Oh, yeah. Remember the tanneries case, MC Mehta v. Union of India?
Yeah.
The court actually ordered the closure of those tanneries that were polluting the Ganga River,
Wow.
even though it meant economic losses for that industry.
So the right to a healthy environment
Yeah.
sometimes trumps
It can,
economic interests.
especially when it comes to something as vital as the Ganga River.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've seen how Articles 19 and 21
Yeah.
play into environmental protection. Now, what about Article 48A?
Okay.
It seems pretty straightforward
It does.
in its mandate to protect the environment
Mm-hmm.
and safeguard forests and wildlife.
Right.
It's just like do it.
Yeah, but what's important here is how it reflects this global shift
Okay.
towards sustainable development.
Mhm.
India is a part of all these international agreements and conventions about protecting the environment.
Yeah.
So Article 48A, it's like India's way of putting those commitments into action.
So it's not just India doing its own thing.
No.
It's about being part of a global effort to
Exactly.
protect the planet.
A global effort.
And that's important because environmental issues don't stop at national borders,
They don't. Things like climate change and pollution affect all of us,
wherever we live.
regardless of where we live.
So Article 48A is like India saying, we're in this together.
Yes.
It's a commitment to both national and global
Yes.
environmental well-being.
It is a commitment to that.
And it's recognizing that protecting the environment is essential for the future
Yes.
of humanity.
Absolutely.
It's not just about saving trees and cute animals.
No.
It's about making sure we have a livable planet
That's right.
for future generations.
For generations to come.
Yeah, it's about the big picture,
The long game.
the long game.
Yes.
We can't just keep exploiting resources and polluting without thinking about the consequences
Right.
for our children and grandchildren.
Exactly. And that's why these constitutional provisions are so important.
Yeah.
They provide that legal framework
Yeah.
for making sure that India develops in a way that's both economically and environmentally sustainable.
Finding that balance.
Finding that balance. Yeah, it's amazing how these provisions have really shaped India's environmental landscape.
Oh, totally. But we've been talking mostly about fundamental rights.
Yeah.
What about those directive principles of state policy?
Right.
How do they fit into all of this?
So think of those directive principles as guidelines for the government.
Okay.
They're not directly enforceable in court,
Hmm.
but they have this moral weight.
Okay.
And they actually influence how the courts interpret the law.
So it's like this underlying philosophy
Yeah.
that guides how the government approaches environmental issues.
Exactly. And a key player here is Article 48A.
Right.
It explicitly urges the state to protect and improve the environment,
Okay.
safeguard forests and wildlife, the whole package.
So it's like a roadmap for sustainable governance,
Yeah,
pushing the state towards those eco-friendly practices.
exactly. And it's not just 48A.
Yeah.
The directive principles as a whole,
Mhm.
with their focus on social and economic justice,
Okay.
they inherently link to environmental protection.
Right.
A degraded environment often hits marginalized communities the hardest.
Right.
Yeah.
For sure.
So working towards environmental well-being, it's essential for achieving those broader goals.
It all ties back to that environmental justice idea,
It does.
making sure that the burden of pollution
Right.
doesn't fall unfairly
Yeah.
on certain
In
communities.
certain communities.
Now, this might seem like a bit of a jump,
Okay.
but the Indian Penal Code,
The IPC.
the IPC from 1860,
Yeah.
it actually has provisions related to environmental protection.
It does.
Really?
Yeah.
I wouldn't have thought of that.
Yeah.
What kind of provisions are we talking about?
Well, the concept of public nuisance, as defined in Section 268,
Okay.
it has some serious environmental implications.
Mm.
It covers acts that cause any kind of common injury, danger, or annoyance to the public.
Right.
And that includes stuff like air and water pollution.
So if a factory's like releasing toxic fumes
Yeah,
that are making people sick,
exactly.
that could be considered a public nuisance
It could be
under the IPC.
under the IPC.
Wow. In sections 269 to 278,
Mm-hmm.
they actually lay out specific punishments
They do.
for different types of nuisance.
That's right.
So people or companies responsible for environmental harm
Yeah,
can actually be prosecuted.
they can.
Wow. So it's not just about civil lawsuits
Right.
or environmental regulations.
It goes beyond that.
You can face criminal charges
You can.
for polluting the environment.
That's right.
That shows you how seriously the law takes this
It does.
and how it's integrated into this whole legal framework.
The broader framework.
Okay, let's switch gears back to the Constitution for a sec.
You're okay.
We talked about Article 51 AG
Yeah,
and citizens' duties.
right.
But are there other fundamental duties
Mm-hmm.
that are relevant to environmental protection?
You could argue that a bunch of them contribute indirectly.
Okay.
Take Article 51A,
Okay.
which promotes scientific temper
Right.
and inquiry.
Yeah.
That encourages people to understand environmental issues based on,
Okay.
reason and
Yeah.
evidence, which is crucial for making informed decisions.
Absolutely.
And then you have Article 51 AJ, which is about striving for excellence.
Hmm.
You could interpret that as including, responsible environmental stewardship.
Okay. So even though they're not specifically about the environment,
Yeah.
these duties kind of help create
You contribute.
this culture of environmental awareness
You do.
and responsibility.
Exactly.
All right, now remember how we talked about the interplay between Article 19, the freedom of trade and commerce, and
Yeah.
those restrictions that protect the environment?
Yeah.
Well, there's a specific law that really fleshes those restrictions out.
Okay.
The Environment Protection Act of 1986.
Yes. The EPA.
The EPA.
This act is a big deal.
Okay, what does it actually do?
Well, it gives the central government a lot of power.
Okay.
They can set environmental standards, regulate industries,
Okay.
handle hazardous substances,
Right.
basically do whatever it takes to protect and improve environmental quality.
So it's a pretty powerful tool
It is.
for the government to enforce environmental laws
Yes.
and hold polluters accountable.
It is.
It was enacted after the Bhopal gas tragedy, right?
It was. That was a major wake-up call for India in terms of environmental regulation.
Absolutely. And it emphasizes the precautionary principle,
Yes.
which means...
Which means that even if there's some uncertainty
Okay.
about the scientific evidence,
Mhm.
the government can take action to prevent potential harm.
So it's better to be safe than sorry.
Exactly. Especially when you're dealing with the environment.
You don't want to wait until there's a full-blown crisis.
No, you don't.
Okay, so we've talked about constitutional provisions,
Yeah.
national laws.
Mm-hmm.
What about international environmental law?
Right.
Does that have any influence on how India approaches all of this?
It definitely does. India has signed on to a whole bunch of international environmental agreements, conventions like the Stockholm Declaration, the Rio Declaration, the UN Convention on Climate Change.
Okay.
Now, while these aren't directly enforceable in Indian courts, they've had a huge impact on India's environmental policies and how judges interpret the law.
So they're like setting the global standards.
Yeah, you could say that.
And India is incorporating those standards
Right.
into its own legal framework.
Exactly. And one of the key concepts from these international agreements is sustainable development,
Right.
balancing economic growth with environmental protection.
Which makes sense,
It does.
considering how quickly India is growing.
Right. It's about making sure that growth doesn't come at the cost of the environment.
Absolutely. Okay, so beyond those landmark cases
Yeah.
and laws, are there any other like significant trends or principles that have shaped India's approach?
Well, one that's really important is the polluter pays principle.
Okay.
Basically, whoever is responsible for polluting, they have to pay for cleaning it up.
Seems fair.
Yeah.
The people who made the mess
Yeah.
should clean it up.
Ex-
Any cases where we see this in action?
Oh, yeah. The Vellore Citizens Forum case is a great example.
Okay.
A bunch of tanneries were polluting the environment, and the court held them responsible for restoring the affected area.
Wow.
They had to pay for the cleanup.
So it's not just about fines or penalties.
No, it goes beyond that.
It's about making sure the polluter actually fixes the damage
Fixes the damage.
they've caused.
Exactly. And there are other cases like the Calcutta Tanneries case,
Okay.
the shrimp farming case, where this principle was applied.
So it's really become a cornerstone
It has.
of Indian environmental law.
It has.
That's encouraging. It means polluters can't just get away with it,
It can't.
you know,
Yeah.
without consequences.
There are consequences.
Okay, so we've got the precautionary principle, the polluter pays principle, the idea of sustainable development.
Yeah.
Any other key concepts we should be aware of?
One more I'd add is the public trust doctrine.
Okay.
This one's pretty interesting.
And I'm listening.
It basically says that certain natural resources, like air and water,
Yeah.
they belong to everyone, and they're held in trust by the state for the benefit of current and future generations.
So it's like recognizing that these resources are a common heritage.
Yes. A common heritage.
Not just commodities to be exploited.
Exactly.
For profit.
And the state has a duty to protect these resources from being, exploited or damaged.
Right.
We see this play out in cases like MC Mehta v. Kamal Nath,
Okay.
also known as the Bees River case. The court used the public trust doctrine to say that the state had to protect the Bees River from pollution and encroachment.
So the government can't just let private companies pollute a river.
No, they can't.
Or build on some sensitive land.
They can't.
Because those resources belong to everyone.
They belong to everyone.
And this doctrine has been applied in a lot of other cases, too.
It has. Cases like the Indian Council for Envirolegal Action v. Union of India case.
So it's become a powerful tool.
A very powerful tool.
For protecting natural resources.
Yes.
It's so cool how these principles are evolving.
Yeah.
And being applied in real-world cases.
They are.
It shows how the legal system is adapting
It is adapting.
to address these environmental challenges.
It is.
Totally. And beyond these specific principles,
Yeah.
there's this growing trend of recognizing environmental rights as being interconnected with other fundamental rights.
Exactly.
Like the right to a healthy environment
Yeah.
is often seen as essential for enjoying the right to life,
Yes.
health, even livelihood.
Absolutely.
So it's all connected.
It's all connected.
You know, protecting the environment isn't just about some abstract legal concept.
It's not.
It's about protecting people's basic rights.
Exactly.
Ensuring a decent quality of life.
That's what it's all about.
And that's what makes environmental law so compelling.
It is.
It's not just about legal technicalities.
No.
It's about safeguarding our planet, the well-being of present and future generations.
Absolutely.
Well said. So for all the law students out there who are trying to wrap their heads around all of this, what does it all actually mean?
Well, it means that environmental law in India, it's a dynamic field.
Oh.
It's constantly evolving.
Right.
It's not just about memorizing a bunch of laws. It's about understanding these interconnected principles and how they're applied in real-world situations.
So seeing the bigger picture.
The bigger picture.
Understanding the philosophy behind the law.
Yes.
And being able to connect the dots.
Connecting the dots.
Between these legal concepts and real-world environmental challenges.
Exactly.
And it also means staying up to date.
Yes.
With current environmental issues.
Right.
New court decisions.
New laws.
New laws.
It's a constant learning process.
So there's never a dull moment.
Never a dull moment.
In environmental law.
It's exciting.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
And it's an important area to study.
Yeah, it sounds like a field where you can really make a difference.
Oh, definitely. Whether it's through litigation, policy, advocacy research, I mean, there are so many ways for lawyers to contribute to protecting the environment and shaping a sustainable future, you know, for India.
That's awesome.
Oh.
Okay, before we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
anything else you think our listeners should keep in mind about constitutional provisions in environmental protection in India?
I think one crucial thing to remember is that this is not a static area of law.
Right.
You know, new interpretations are always emerging through those court decisions. New laws are being passed.
Right.
And those international agreements, they continue to influence India's approach.
So you can't just learn the basics and call it a day.
You can't. You got to stay on top of these developments to really grasp those nuances of environmental law in India.
It's constantly evolving.
It's constantly evolving.
And beyond just knowing the legal stuff.
Yeah.
It's so important to have a real grasp of the actual environmental challenges
that
India is facing.
That India's facing.
Climate change, pollution, deforestation, biodiversity loss.
Yeah.
These are real issues.
Real and pressing issues that demand creative legal solutions.
It's a call to action for all those aspiring lawyers out there.
It is.
It's not just about understanding the law.
No.
It's about using that knowledge to advocate for change.
Absolute.
To protect the environment for future generations.
Couldn't agree more. And it requires thinking beyond just the law.
Right.
Environmental law, it intersects with economic science, social justice, even politics. The more well-rounded your understanding is, the more effective you'll be as an advocate for environmental protection.
It's about connecting the dots.
Connecting those dots.
Seeing the big picture.
The big picture.
Understanding how the law can be this powerful tool for positive change.
Precisely. And that's what makes environmental law such a fascinating and rewarding field. It's not just about legal technicalities. You know, it's about safeguarding our planet and ensuring a sustainable future for all.
Okay, to wrap up this deep dive,
Yes.
What's like the one key takeaway you want our listeners to remember?
I think the biggest takeaway is this. Even though the Indian Constitution doesn't explicitly say right to a clean environment, it actually provides this incredibly robust framework for environmental protection. You know, through the interplay of fundamental rights, directive principles, fundamental duties, those judicial interpretations, India has developed this strong legal foundation for tackling environmental challenges. But remember, this is an ongoing journey. It requires that active citizen engagement, innovative legal thinking, and a deep commitment to protecting our environment for generations to come.
So powerful. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into constitutional provisions for environmental protection in India.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been an incredibly insightful
The
journey.
pleasure was all mine.
And to all our listeners out there, thanks for tuning in to LexTalks. Don't forget to subscribe and stay updated with our upcoming deep dives into the fascinating world of law. Until next time, happy learning.